Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Most Maligned Horror Podcast. This is a show offering critical analysis and critique of the horror films of the 2000s. My name is Macaulay Elijah Quinn. I am a filmmaker and film critic. And joining me on this episode is Eppo of Unfeatured Films, YouTuber, video essayist, extraordinaire.
And a librarian by day trade. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. You've been a follower of the show for a while. I've been following you, and it's really great to have you on.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. Always, like, it sounds so contrived to be like, oh, I'm such a fan, but I really am. So it's really a pleasure.
Yeah, you've your videos have been some of my favorites on YouTube in the past few months. I discovered your channel through you did a video on The House with Arched Windows, which was a film I covered on this show, and at the time there was no other discussion of it, and I sent you a message just recently and said I really wish that your video had existed because it would have been so useful to reference. It would have been so good for me to have somebody else to refer to and to point people towards. Because, that was a really fantastic video. And then your video on found footage horror, of course, which was plugged by Sean McTiernan on... It was Confessions of a Crap Artist that it was plugged on, wasn't it? The Patreon show. Yeah. So that video as well is just excellent. I could listen to you talk about films all day. And then, of course, your most recent film was on landscape films as well, which was not really a genre of film that I had heard of up until then, and it was so compelling. I immediately was like, I have to watch some of these films. Just really, really great work.
Thank you. I'm so happy that even in this sort of horror context, you do end up with landscape film, because my channel was kind of birthed from this idea of because there's a lot of really good video essay stuff about like the mainstream movies that are currently ongoing. You have a lot of Marxist analysis, you have like critical gender studies, post-colonial studies, sort of viewpoints into these like pop movies. And I was like, well, but how many more video essays do we need about the newest Spider-Man movie when there's a whole history of movies nobody's even heard about that could like use the sort of lift up and discussion, because they're always a little bit more hairy and complicated compared to like the blockbuster stuff. Yeah. And I wanted to sort of combine the quote unquote, this is like the worst possible terminology, but like that quote high class and low class sort of cinema, because I watch both, and like in bulk, I love the really arty like art gallery stuff. I love the grimy horror stuff, like it, even like something that's like fundamentally broken has a very interesting beauty to it.
Yes.
To me. And I think if you go from like the outer edges of genres and like art styles, you can start to see that there's an unspoken web between them. Like suddenly you have stuff like the House with Arched Windows, which is done on a like $0 budget, and then you have something like, landscape movies, which are often also zero budget affairs, and they sort of start to make this alternative history and canon for cinema in general. And I'm kind of trying to carve my way around that from a very limited perspective. Of course, I do have like a vocational studies like 3-year education on cinema, but it is still very, very limited, and it's always very tied to my personal taste. But
Yeah.
Sort of carve an alternative. That's my main goal with
Yeah.
the channel.
Yeah, that's really refreshing and really rewarding to watch as well. My background in film, I studied film at university and filmmaking at university, and I did a 3-year bachelor's degree in it was in fine art with like film as the sort of like subcategory. I came out of that with some theoretical knowledge, but very similar to you, all of my sort of analysis and things like that, it is really tied to like myself, my personal sort of taste and experience and things like that. And yeah, over the years, it became more interesting to me to think about and to talk about sort of lower budget films and things like that, because like you said, they chafe a little bit. Like, audiences don't really know what to make of them. There's a whole class of like video essayist or just sort of like YouTube like commentator and things like that, who they watch these films and the extent of their critique is like, this is bad, or like, this is bad because it's lower budget, or breaks with convention in these ways. And for me, it's like, no, that's like so compelling. Like, even if it's not 100% effective all the time, it's still worth treating these pieces of art as like whole complete works, rather than just looking at them and saying, well, they weren't able to do everything that like a mainstream movie is able to do, and so therefore.
Yeah, I do, like, I really agree with, like, there's the friction of you have to sort of adjust yourself to it, and I sort of see it as an emergent art sort of thing that happens, and I sort of build a lot of my like critical thinking from not actually like film studies. Like, film studies were extremely important, of course, and even my studies, which were more about the production, we did have like film history courses and how to analyze movies and stuff, and it was really funny to be there, and the teacher was like, no, you're being a hard hat sort of like working guy, now watch Mirror by Tarkovsky. And you're like, this is not like a working man's job, sort of. Well, it is, but it was really weird to have those worlds collide. But when I got out of film school, I had like this sort of two poles of, you have art house and then you have mainstream. And then I got into like video game discussion online, and I found a lot of channels like Aaron Signal, Super Bunny Hob, etc., who started to talk about how like things are emergent from the art. So you have these like storytelling aspects that happen because a system is imperfect in some way.
Yeah.
And how those aren't, like, you cannot separate that from the text. And then I went into music, and I'm a musician of like noise and drone and ambient persuasion, and in that world also you're always kind of embracing happy accidents, and how different mediums like tape and like scratched up CDs, or how different effects pedals create this new amalgamation of things that are controlled by you maybe, but they are also like a co-author almost. There's the friction of, this thing happened, now you have to deal with it as a part of your art. And that kind of blew open the sort of, okay, so what do I do with this knowledge when it comes to movies? And then somebody, I think it was Sarah Zedek, made a video where she mentioned the invisible style, which is like the thing where in Hollywood movies, the formal language of cinema is so codified that you don't even really pay attention to how the story is told. You've internalized the language, but it is so sort of dominant that you don't even consider that there are alternative styles.
Yes.
So when I sort of started to go down that path, you get into sort of how cinema is a language, and you're like, wait a minute, I've always thought of movies as this, like, okay, they either like achieve this high level of production value and good acting and all of that, but that's like saying that English is the only like valid language to have. There are so many languages. How do I explore these languages? And then it becomes really weirdly classist and sort of glib when people are just like, oh yeah, this movie is okay. It's really cheap though. And you're like, well, yeah, but most people just don't have access to what are called low budget movies of $5 million.
Yeah.
Like, and like that's such a high threshold, and movies are just like an art form. Are we supposed to be contented with a world where you have to have literal company building capital to create an indie production? No, like you can just do whatever the fuck you want, and it's valid, and it should be approached as what it is.
Absolutely. When you watch a lower budget production, you so easily pick up on this is something that was made by people. Whereas when you watch like something with a higher budget, something that was, a Hollywood production or something like that, all of that stuff does disappear, like you were saying. And so, yeah, it's really rewarding to see somebody like yourself covering films like Terratoons or, The House with Arched Windows and treating them with, like, respect and, your channel's a real inspiration for me and for my work.
I think this whole topic is a really good way to segue into the actual movie we are.
Yes, I
here
haven't
to
actually
discuss.
introduced that yet, have I? I normally do that in the intro. So we today are going to be covering Richard Lehman's In the Dark. Before we get into sort of the meat of the film, I want to ask you a little bit. You've seen this film before watching it for the show?
Yeah, I actually watched it, I think a couple of years ago, before I had my Letterboxd, and I forgot to log it. It was, I think at this point we do need to have a little sort of paying respects, because I'm pretty sure, could be that you didn't, but I'm pretty sure, because we're both Sean McTiernan fans, we both probably found out about In the Dark through the wonderful podcast Live at the Death Factory. Yeah. And because that movie, like, In the Dark is so obscure that it still has like just a couple of thousand views on YouTube and maybe a couple of hundred on Letterboxd. And I watched it back then when the episode dropped, and I had the wonderful experience of having listened to the podcast episode first, and then I went to watch it and I was like, yeah, they're completely right. This is the shit. This is exactly the type of stuff. And then I rewatched it after you approached me, and I was really precarious because I have listened to that episode of Live at the Death Factory like 5 or 6 times, or maybe even more. I'm a repeat listener because I take a lot of dog walks and stuff. and I was like, I'm not sure because I've listened to it so many times. I don't know if I can separate my own viewpoint from what they said.
Yeah.
And like 10 minutes in, I was like, okay, yeah, no, I actually have an original take. And then I watched the research notes you posted, and I was like, okay, I can totally see that there is a new avenue. Because, you know, that's like the thing usually. Art can be approached from different angles. And yeah, I'm also a huge fan of In the Dark. Truly a singular work in the sort of shot on video canon.
Yeah. So at the time of recording, it's currently still sitting on 6,000 views. I thought it was higher than that. I thought after their episode it had like blown up, and like to a degree it has, but that's still criminally low, I think. I'll put a link to the film in the episode description, because it's really worth watching if you haven't seen the film. The general sort of premise is a librarian named Jane is sort of tired of her humdrum sort of day-to-day existence, and she starts receiving money from a person going by Master of Games, Mog, who is paying her money to complete challenges of sorts.
Yeah, you could say that.
Some of them are challenges, some of them are just sort of like things to do. Like one of them is like spend a night in a haunted house. Another one is well, it's sort of implied rescue a baby from a car in a graveyard. But what the challenge sort of ends up being is survive a dog attack.
A really harrowing dog attack too, because like I was not emotionally prepared for that scene, because like when you get to that moment, you get this sort of weird, okay, so we're in this puzzle of how to get the dog out of the car without getting injured, and you start to see this sort of weird, like, because all the things that she's tasked to do are like sort of these small little things that are either endurance testing or just kind of like these complicated chores she has to kind of puzzle through.
Yeah.
And none of them are like soul traps or anything. Like, this is pre-torture porn in that sort of way.
Yes.
They're just like these little tasks that don't really seem to have a point to them, but she does them because there's a reward and an intrigue to completing them.
Yeah. So that's an important note, is that Jane is really compelled to do this for financial reasons. She is making good money off of this. The prize draw sort of doubles every time that she completes a task. So it starts at like $50, and by the end of the film, I think it's almost $500,000. I think it's like 50,000 or something like that. It's a lot of money.
I think it was the final number was like 46,000.
Yeah,
I think that was the final number I remember.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the Leatherman says at the end of the film.
Yeah,
it can be a little hard to decipher.
At the very, very end, it is implied to be like a very bourgeois level of income, with a price to it.
Yes. But as well as the sort of financial side of things, Jane is also just really curious about like who this person is that's giving her money. She's like she finds it really exciting, and it's so different from the life that she has sort of lived up until this point. Have you read any other Richard Lehman works?
Actually, no. I am aware of him because I follow quite a lot of like horror booktubers.
Hmm.
There's a pretty great video from the channel Plagued by Visions
Oh,
that's
yes. Yep.
called like I read my first Dick Lehman, sorry, Richard Lehman book, and I just got like this distinct feeling that Richard Lehman is for like those people who do like webcam YouTube horror movie like reviews where they talk about the release and then they very like weirdly drop in that like, yeah, pretty inventive kills, good TNA, and then you're like, dude, like this, like you're talking about like cannibal holocaust, like there's no, like you cannot say that there's good TNA in this. And once you really like sort of get into that mode, a lot of horror discussion gets really a lot scarier than the movies
Yeah.
themselves. And like the excerpts I've read and heard spoken out loud of Layman's work does carry that sort of bro horror, like slamming down a couple of brewskis with the
Yeah,
friendzos
definitely.
and complaining about the, I don't know, fucking woke mob coming in and taking away our invasive whole body licking imagery of naked women, while also calling them all whores or something. Like
Yeah.
just rancid vibes
Yeah.
from the offset. I tend to not be interested in that stuff, if that's like the selling point.
Yeah.
I was struggling with how to say this before the pod because I was like, yeah, I could find a way in, but do I want to find a way in to have a critical discussion about a person whose like female characters all seem to be discussed via how bangable they are?
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of real like r/men writing women sort of stuff going on in his books. It's a lot
For
of
sure.
she-breasted boobily down the stairs. Like it's rough. The one book of his that I read, the only one stocked by by my local library was the Traveling Vampire Show, which is sort of a it's sort of a Stand By Me sort of thing of like, nostalgic childhood innocence being broken sort of thing. And every female character in the book, in any given scene, you are going to hear the character's opinion on how attractive they are, where their breasts are in relation to like whatever they're doing. She bent down, I saw down her top. Like it's real. Like every movement that they make. It's not great, and as well, it's incredibly long as well. From my understanding, this is sort of a trope of Richard Lehman's books, is that they're all broken into lots of small chapters. So the Traveling Vampire Show is like 60, 70 chapters long. And the book plays out basically in real time. So it starts at like midday and ends like after midnight. And it's so like it's very dry at points.
Yeah, that is a challenging proposition for a person who already has a little bit of difficulties reading books in general. I used to be a really big reader, but nowadays I'm mostly just reading for the show and stuff.
Yeah.
So I gotta say, Richard Lehman, not on the top of my to be reading pile.
Yeah.
A lot of more interesting voices are currently coming out of the horror scene, and even historically, you have so many under discussed, under explored, and just like general like classics I have not read. So to sort of even get to the place where Richie's material seems to be. It would take a couple of years, but
Yeah.
not totally ruling it out, but doesn't really seem like the type of writer I'd love.
Yeah, no, I'm sort of right there with you. I read the Traveling Vampire show after watching In the Dark, and I will say he's pretty effective at sort of like the actual horror elements. It's just everything that sort of like brackets that is, yeah, just it's quite sort of acidic, and you've really got to be in the right headspace to approach it and things like that. The reason I wanted to bring up the Traveling Vampire show specifically, though, was that it also features a scene of violence towards a dog that is like quite harrowing. In the Dark, you have the confrontation that we talked about, where you've got this dog in the car and Jane's trying to sort of maneuver him out, and she ends up stabbing him in the flank. And that seems to be, based on the one book of his that I've read, it seems to be a recurring image, because that exact same thing happens in the Traveling Vampire show.
You know, what can you say? Fuck them dogs.
This is coming from two dog lovers here.
But yeah, I think in a sort of way, if you really stop to think about that sort of structure that you laid out, it does have a sort of similar like thing to a lot of like classic slashers and giallos, where you have this like very effective focus and like grand, how would you say, like you have the craft to create these moments of horror and splatter, and like you put everything on that, but then you do need to have all the connective tissue, and you're just kind of waffling your way through it.
Yeah.
Which is sort of charming in its own way. Personally, I always really love the moments in slashers between the first kill and the second kill, where they're just kind of vibing. But it can be very, very tedious if there's no like texture or interesting characters, or in books case, it probably would need quite a lot of finesse on the text itself to make it come alive. Yeah. And breasted boobly is not
It's
very
endearing. It's not really the
like
vibe,
it does not give me the vibe that it would be the
Yeah.
case. But very much a horror guy in that sense.
In the Dark plays out very, very episodically, and there is sort of a fair amount of downtime between sort of each of the talent challenges, each of the tasks. There's a lengthy scene in this movie where Jane is playing Silent Hill, and we just sort of watch her playing, and for my money, that's one of the best scenes in the movie.
It's actually a reoccurring motif that gets like twisted throughout the film, because it happens at least 3 times, and I took note because the first time it's just like establishing that this is a thing she does on her free time.
Yes.
There's even like a pointed bit of dialogue with the secondary character Brace, who I have very, very sort of deep feelings about.
Yeah.
But anyways, like the first thing they talk about basically is like, what do you do outside of work? And she's like, well, I play video games. And she is very much presented as a person who does that, like unironically, and just like as this almost instinctual thing, because later down in the movie, when she goes to meet Brace at his place, she actually takes her PlayStation 1 with her as this sort of maybe like a protective token or a way to pass the time. And like that passing of the time is what the like game is there to do. and it's the game itself is Silent Hill 2, I think. It's either 1 or 2 of Silent Hill.
It's one. It's the first.
Okay, because I was like, oh shit, it's been too
I've
long.
been
since
replaying
I've
it this week.
played. Yeah.
I watched the film and I was like, I've got to get back into this.
Oh, okay, yeah, you have the advantage, but it is like this famously thrilling, like anxiety-inducing game, and it's just used as this sort of time is passing monotonously, and there's even a really nice formalistic aspect to it, where whenever she's playing, you can hear the footsteps of the character, and it sounds like a clock ticking.
Yeah.
And the first time you just get this sense that it's something she does in between her work. Then it comes back to the movie after she fails one of the tasks that Master of Games gave her. And there's a long, like multiple day long pause between the assignments, where she's just constantly playing, and you have this tick-tock of the walking animation. And then in the end, actually there's 4 scenes of the video game, but anyways, like it's reiterated throughout the movie, and in the end it's just this glazed, once again returning to playing the game in between jobs, but this time it's just like you're not even there mentally. Like it used to be this escapist thing, and now it's just a thing you do out of the force of habit.
Yes.
So it's like a leitmotif in the movie, which is really, really, really charming to me. Haven't seen that anywhere before, at least executed this effectively.
No, it's this is a very remarkable film in a lot of ways. It's really quite inventive. It makes a lot of the filmmakers make a lot of very interesting decisions that I've said on this show a couple of times that the sort of having a lower budget sort of allows filmmakers a level of flexibility and a level of sort of like creative freedom that larger budgets just don't provide. And that isn't to say that a lower budget film is virtuous just by dint of its having a lower budget, but it's really remarkable the ways in which this feels like a real movie that just so happens to have a lower budget. This film was shot for, at most a couple $1,000s, probably less. I couldn't find any exact numbers, but they made a movie. And when I've shown this to friends and loved ones and things like that, I've been trying to do it every month. I do these like double features at my house where I just get a bunch of people around and I subject them to 2 movies that are sort of like loosely connected, either by genre or by theme or by, character, director, things like that. And when I showed them In the Dark, the response that it got was, I don't know why they shot this on video. Like, I don't know why it looks the way that it does, because the story, the creative decision making that went into it is really like high quality, really top tier, and the video quality and the audio quality at points is quite low. And yeah, I think it's worth sort of pushing back against that sort of way of thinking. Like, the aesthetic sort of quality of this film as a result of it being shot on video, I think that it really adds something. I feel like something would be lost if you were to shoot this film on, an Arri Alexa or whatever, I feel like something would be lost.
Yeah, I completely agree. Really quickly, what did you double feature with this? I'm really
I
curious.
actually played the Saw like short film that James Wan and is it Louis Fennell? I don't think that's right.
Yeah, I think yeah.
But
Well, anyways, a very interesting choice. But yeah, I do agree that if you were to remake this with like an RE or whatever, like high quality 4K camera, and you would light it in a manner that's more reminiscent of a like quote unquote correct style, and that it would just feel a lot more like just like a Vimeo like show reel sort of affair.
mm,
And I think for me personally, the sort of quality that the fuzzy, like probably VHS or some like other format it was used. It was shot on like maybe Super 8. I'm not super knowledgeable of the differences
mm,
like visually or tonally. I don't know a lot about cameras, but the thing that it really reminded me of, especially towards the beginning, is like mumblecore and like slacker movies.
mm,
I was constantly having like this. This feels like an indie, like a drama movie from the mid 2000s, or like an early Kevin Smith joint,
mm,
or like something of that nature. And it has those qualities of being this sort of not crappy, scrappy, and relatable, and very much like this real feeling thing, like especially towards the beginning where you have the discussions between Jane and Brace. There is actual like mumblecore-esque chemistry
mm.
between them. They just have this casual conversation, and whenever she's like meeting people, it's always there's this weird sort of awkwardness around it. And I
Yeah,
think that
there's a
kind of,
tension to all of it.
yeah, and it feels like these are real people in like a physical space that are interacting in a more real and unguarded way. And I was really captured by the editing of In the Dark, because especially towards the beginning, you have a lot of very interesting choices of jump cuts, and very like this angular poppy sort of way to move the scene forward while still communicating time
Mm,
passing. And even later down the movie, you have very sort of new wave, like French new wave type of looping editing. Like
yes.
there's a scene later down in the movie where Jane is tasked to go into this house where there are three people torturing and sort of mutilating women, and she kills them. And there's a shot where she like keeps shooting at the dead people, and it's just the same thing over and over again for a
Yeah.
little while. And I was just like, damn, like I don't know how much this is like a creative choice, but the emergent factor of it is just that it feels like they were so in control of the like cinematic language that it didn't matter that they had sort of unideal materials they were working with,
Yes.
because they created something that still has the feel of a quote unquote real movie, but then there's this added texture and sort of like the feeling of something you wouldn't normally have in a horror movie. Like most horror movies just don't feel like they could just be a couple of people slowly falling in love in the same way that In the Dark
Yeah.
feels.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Do you want to talk about Brace a little bit more?
Yes, yes. This is just like I think a personal taste difference, because in the original episode of the Live at the Death Factory, they talk about how Brace feels like a tacked on love interest in a way.
Yeah.
And they're like, it doesn't really feel like they really build him up. And it's like in the final scene, I completely disagree. I was like actually invested from the word go because they have a chemistry.
They do. It's really compelling. They're in the episode, both Sean and Astrid are quite dismissive of Brace. And you're right. When he comes on screen, there's something about him. He's just a really, there is like a quiet charisma to him. He's like he feels very approachable and like very warm, and it's like I know Brace. I've met Brace multiple times. He's kind of great. And his sort of like hapless like unwillingness to participate in these challenges is really, I think, quite endearing. You've got after the scene where Jane confronts the men in the house and kills them all, she comes back to Brace's place and is talking to him about it, and his response to her having killed somebody is just like, oh my god, like what have you done? How has this happened?
I think Brace is sort of like this anchoring force of the movie, because he's like aggressively just a normal kind of guy trying to hit on this cute librarian he met, and I think he has that he has a sort of average Joe kind of vibe, but he also has a wit to him, and he definitely has this defined like what he wants and what he's trying to do, what are his priorities, what like you really get a sense of the person like very immediately.
Yes.
And whenever they're just kind of hanging out, you can sort of use Brace's reaction to stuff as this sort of yardstick of like he's constantly being like, yo, you shouldn't do this is really scary, and it was kind of funny in the beginning, but you're really taking this seriously, and it does seem very weird. And did you read the news? There has been like kidnappings, and like I'm getting like really rancid vibes from this, while at the same time, I will return to this point later, he has the most charming "you're unemployed friend at 2 a.m. on a Thursday" vibe, because he's just like always available. He's just like, oh shit, I have purpose now. I'm putting my everything into this relationship with this person I met like 2 weeks ago. And it, like, by some miracle, it doesn't feel like creepy or forced, because he does have that charisma.
Yeah. No, he the confrontation that he has with Jane in the haunted house, where like he comes in like it's like, early hours of the morning, like the sun isn't even up yet, and he just comes like strolling into the room, and he's like, what are you doing? Is like, it's such a good scene, and it's so sweet because you get him just like, you so clearly understand that, like, you understand so much where he's coming from. You understand that he's like seeing this change in Jane's like personality and things like that, and he's really genuinely concerned for her and genuinely scared for her safety. He's the one who provides her with the copy of Silent Hill as well. He sends that to her after like the second or third task that she completes. Is it after the statue that he sends the game?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I didn't take a huge note of that, but yeah.
But yeah, he sends her the game and is like immediately trying to be like, hey, I'm getting bad vibes off of this Master of Games character. You should stop before this goes any further. And here's something that I think you'll like that can can substitute for all of the thrills that you're getting out of these real life games that you're playing.
Yeah, and I think there's also a very pivotal small scene a little later down the line. There's a scene where after Brace gets Jane out of that haunted house, there's a pretty elongated scene of her just kind of trying to kill time anxiously because she just wants Master of Games to send her a new task, and it doesn't happen for, I think it was like 5 days or something.
Yeah, something like that.
And she goes on an evening walk, and there's another dude who just kind of runs up to her, and he's like trying to hit on her, and you immediately have the sense that, okay, we're doing a contrast with Brace, who is this warm, sort of caring person, and now you have this asshole who's just like, dude, I'm so rich, I run in the night, and then it turns out he has like $500 in his bank account, and he's like, $500 is a lot, which it is, but not like in that sort of
in context way. It becomes so funny because at that point she's earned so much more than that just playing these Master of Games games, and it's so funny because he's like, I'm fabulously wealthy, and he is $500
fabulously wealthy, and that like fabulously wealthy is such an important, because I think this scene alone, which seems like a throwaway just to kind of pass the time, I think it's sort of in a very interesting way, not like the key to understand In the Dark, but it really shows how much they cared about the movie, because it has like at least like a triple meaning, because you have the like contrasting with Brace, you have this sort of ambient male like violence brewing, like because that scene comes after Brace informs her of the kidnapping of women.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And then he has the line of, I'm fabulously wealthy, which comes back like way later, like in the second to last scene. Jane confronts this dude in a gimp mask, and he's like basically sort of valor stealing Mog's position.
Yeah.
And he's like, come with me, I'm way better than Brace, like I cut off his ear, and
why would you want to be with Van Gogh?
Mutilated him. And he says that he's fabulously wealthy. So in that moment you're well, at least I was like, wait a moment, was that dude who confronted her in the night also one of Mog's people?
Was he playing his own game?
Yeah, and you're like, okay, so how big is this conspiracy? Because it needs to be said that Mog basically is implied to be like elder god levels of influential.
Yes.
He has this globe-trotting, like planet-wide operation going on, and like that moment when you have the like fabulously wealthy thing, it's the first time you get the sense that no, this is just not like one person doing this. There's a whole network, and then immediately afterwards you get confirmation that no, this is like a huge thing.
Yes.
That he's doing for weird reasons.
Yeah. We sort of see very briefly, sort of at the end of the film, we see what I think is implied to be the Master of Games, and it's this like grey like little creature. Like it's definitely a person, but at the same time the way that they're moving just implies this like inhuman quality. And they're like scuttling about outside the car. They like crawl out from underneath, and they just look monstrous. And yeah, it's such a compelling image. It's compelling is the word that I keep coming back to, mostly because I am not that creative. But you know, it's really something to see. But yeah, you've also got the three men in the house who are, you know, mutilating these women, like forcing them to eat parts of themselves, things like that. Like they're all playing their own game. You've got that guy on the street. You've got even the Leatherman. It's you know, sort of, I don't know if it's fully revealed, but it's at least implied that he is playing his own game. So yeah, it's this massive, it's this big, massive conspiracy it's so unknowable is the thing. You can't really, like think of like a purpose to it. You can't work out like why they would be doing this other than just like for their own enjoyment, like just to see how far they can push people. But it feels so much grander than that when you're watching the film. Like when that final reveal comes of Jane in her sort of like high-rise apartment, and she's again just sitting on the ground. She's playing Silent Hill, and she takes off her like robe and reveals her body just covered in tattoos. It's Obey, isn't it? Just written over and over and over again across every like part of like visible skin. It implies this much larger world. I got very big Clive Barker vibes off of that. Like
yeah, most definitely.
Like something like The Great and Secret Show, or like Midnight Meat Train, or something like that. Like just this, there are horrors beyond your comprehension. This like cosmic horror sort of vibe to it, but in a really grounded, down to earth sort of way.
Yeah, and I would really sort of because that really got me like asking, because like in this sort of way of like there's this implied big world out there, and Jane's whole quest is left quite open for interpretation. The thing I gravitated towards because of your notes was that it is actually sort of about bullshit jobs in general.
Yes.
Because like ultimately what they're all doing is just like a job gig, like a 0-hour job where they're doing stuff, not maybe because they have like a purpose to it. They're completely alienated from what they do.
Yes.
But they bear the sort of, they have to do it. Well, maybe not have to, but it is like very much incentivized that they do it just purely for this monetary reward, and the thing itself is almost completely meaningless. But suddenly at the end you're just like, well, isn't that like how modern economies work? Like these people are just doing shit not because they understand why or even that it's needed, but there's this centralized, or maybe not even centralized, there is this sort of structure in place that pushes them towards like just these acts that are disconnected but all go back to some sort of weird center. There
is something there. Like you said, there's a structure. There is a system that is in place that is being imposed on these people, and it's money that is driving them primarily. Like I said earlier that Jane, she is compelled to sort of find out who the Master of Games is and why they're doing the things that they're doing. But her primary drive throughout the film is money. Like when Brace pulls her out of the haunted house, she gets like furious, and the thing that she's upset about is that she is concerned she's not going to be getting any money from completing the challenge. The same thing happens when she confronts the man at his house. She is sent along to be his slave for the night, and she has this very awkward little confrontation with him, where he like invites her into the house, and is sort of he becomes pretty uncomfortable quite quickly, because she he says like, okay, well, you're here to sleep with me, and she says, well, no, that's not what the that's not what the task is, that's not what the letter says. And he's like, well, it's about sort of what's implied by the letter. But her continuing to say, no, I'm not going to sleep with you, I'll do whatever else, I'll serve you. He becomes like very upset and becomes convinced that she's like wearing a wire or something like that, and eventually throws her out. And again, she gets so upset, and the thing that she's upset about is that she's going to be losing out on money. She's like, well, have I completed the task? Is this enough? She's always trying to, she is always thinking about these tasks in terms of the reward, the financial reward that she will get out of it.
Yeah.
And it's...
And I think, because I think that scene of like, you have to go and be his slave for the evening until midnight, is like specified, is, I think it's a very interesting scene insofar as if you're thinking about in the dark from this like bullshit jobs, like labor centric perspective, is that that's where she is basically at her most powerful. She has given, like, she's pursuing this interesting job that gives her a lot of money, and yet she has the power to control her hours. Well, not her hours, but like she has this agency to be like, nope, not gonna do it. And after she refuses, the person she's made to serve becomes anxious and powerless, and he's like a very pitiful character, because he's like, well, like, but like, I want, and she's like, no, I will not have sex with you. Yeah. Like she has this sort of power in that scene. And like right after that, the things get a lot more dangerous.
Yes.
And slowly it is revealed that she's losing the control.
Yes.
Like that's the extent of her power. And immediately as she tries to sort of understand what's going on, like she's, basically trying to move up the ladder. She's trying to assert herself in the workplace, and she's immediately struck down. And she's like, well, no, I am this powerful person, and I'm like doing serious work. I'm getting a lot of money. I'm like invested. I'm on my grind set.
Yeah.
And eventually she gets like horrifically abused.
Yes.
In this like way where she's trying to sort of communicate with the master of games. She gets knocked out, violated, which is like a powerful metaphor for how people who are within these sort of job structures often get grounded down eventually. Like you're welcomed in, we're all family, and then you're like, well, we're supposed to be like, maybe we should do it like this, and I have all of these ideas, and I'm trying to project myself on this company, I'm trying to do a self-expression, I'm trying to get power, and suddenly you're just a component that's to be used and abused.
All of a sudden you learn that actually this is very hierarchical. For all of the illusions that a business might make to like you having personal freedom and things like that, at the end of the day, they will take from you whatever they want. I've worked multiple jobs like this. You know, there are. I've been talking with. We just recently went through a general election here in New Zealand, and the Conservative Party was the ultimate sort of winner of that. Their entire campaign was run on we need to be helping sort of the middle and lower classes. We need to be raising these people up. And then as soon as they got power, the first thing that they did away with was fair pay agreements in the workplace. So you are no longer required to pay women or Indigenous people or youth workers or anything like that. You are no longer required to pay them the same amount as their male counterparts. And it's like that's this film, is like seeing somebody who she is trying to find herself through work. Jane is trying to define herself by the work that she does, by the tasks that she completes. And what she sort of learns by the end of it is that actually none of this matters, really. None of this defines you as a person, but if you allow it to, it will consume you. It will completely take over your life and take over your world, and you will become just a mindless, task completing automaton.
And I was really thinking about because In the Dark really works through contrasts. As we as we already explored, the dude who goes hiking in the night is a great evidence of this sort of structure that they're implying, not employing. But I think it's meaningful that she is a librarian in the beginning, and it is this sort of upkeep job that's really dull, and she doesn't really seem to find a lot of herself in it.
Yeah, there's not a lot of purpose to be found within the work that she's doing.
It is. Yeah, but it's a very traditional sort of job. You're there to perform tasks whenever they're needed, and I think what was there in the camera? It says that it's a university camera that she's borrowing around halfway point of the movie.
Yeah.
She does a whole entrapment thing with the Master of Games. But anyways, she's working.
Some of the best scenes in the movie.
Yeah, fantastic sequence. But I think if we move a little bit outside of the text, because I think as a librarian, it hit me that In the Dark is very much a movie where you're moving from the public sector to the private sector, and sort of moving from this job security towards a gig economy. And I was supposed to sort of check how prominent gig economies were in the 90s, especially towards the end. Just couldn't find the time to read up on it, but it still works. Art and time, you can read stuff into it. But I really think that it's interesting that she has the job security to just sort of do her things, express herself, date around. She has quite a lot of scenes towards the beginning where she's just vibing, making phone calls. There's even a very nice little detail. She does a phone call after a shower, I think, and she's twirling the phone cord with her toes and stuff, very cutesy, once again mumblecore stuff. And the further you go, the more serious it gets. This scenes in her home turn into these like battles against master of games that take part in her, like take part in her body. What's the word?
I mean, yes, literally.
yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was like thinking that it is this sort of progression, like it's a breaking point in the way we do labor that was sort of happening, I guess, in the break of the new millennium. Like there wasn't this conception of you do just this one job. Everything became accelerated, and everybody knows, like everyone who has like critical as like viewpoint of the job industry knows that like the sort of startup 0-hour work, all that stuff is just like the worst possible thing you can do to yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that's a meaningful thing that happens. Also, very a small moment around like 1/3 of the way in. After she fails the staying in the ghost house thing, she goes back to her job and she's bored and like all of that, and she sees a person sleeping on the library's couch. And it is like a really small moment. I think it's like 5 edits long or something, and the edits in this movie are very quick.
Yes.
But it really rings to me because that's like, well, it's not an actually huge thing when you're a librarian, but it's one of those things that people always like raise up as this scary thing that you need to be aware of, that people are sleeping in the library, and we have like these kind of elaborate like codes of conduct on what to do when you find someone sleeping in the library, and the point is that they're either homeless, which is really dangerous, or they're drug users, which is really dangerous, and you're supposed to contact your like guard or the police or something, and she doesn't do it. And once again, not sure what the intention specifically was. It just could be like this moment of texture. But for me, I saw that as an actual moment of agency where she is confronting this situation where probably like the conventional wisdom would be to act sort of as this government, like this cop sort of role, where she's supposed to wake him up, throwing out of the library, diffuse the situation before it gets to violence, which is such a bullshit narrative, but people still use it constantly. So there is this like actual human agency and actual human care that's displayed in her inactivity, whereas whenever she's doing the mock jobs, she's stabbing dogs in the ribs and shooting people in the head and whatever. So I think it's such a fantastic little moment that probably will like just go fly past most people.
I was going to say that it wasn't even a scene that I really thought of like when watching the film. I was just sort of like, here's just another thing that happens. But yeah, you're thinking about it, it's like you're so right. It's
good to know.
There's throughout this show, so one of the purposes of this show, I imagine that this will be an episode that a lot of people maybe jump in on for the first time, so it's maybe worth restating that one of the goals of this show is to contextualize these films, to put them into sort of a context, to compare and contrast with the other films that came out before and came out after. And one of the things that I've found watching all of these films from 2000 specifically is that there has been this sort of recurring theme of a distaste for work, or for, at the very least, like corporate culture, or for these systems that force people out of themselves, that strips them of agency, takes away their hobbies, takes away their relationships, just to be able to survive, just to be able to, pay the rent and buy groceries and things like that. There have been multiple films that I've covered on this show, starting all the way back with Cabin by the Lake, which I think was the second episode of the show. And then with something like Bruiser by George Romero, or American Psycho as well, you have this constant return to this distaste for capitalist structures and capitalist systems. And I find that really interesting. And In the Dark is, I think, another one of these films. It is, as we've talked about now for, about an hour, this is a film that is very much about work and about doing a job. But it's also so predictive of a lot of things to come, and so predictive of the gig economy, like you said. I have a friend who we met in film school, and he started doing Uber just like on the side, and he was like, oh, this is like really fantastic. And he was like talking about it, he was like big upping Uber as a job, saying like, oh, I get to, work whenever I like, and, I get to just sort of like drive around, listen to music, all of these things. And he is now, 4 years later, he is still doing Uber, but he just finds it to be the most stressful thing on earth. Like, he is just he has to work so long. Like, he no longer gets to choose his hours. Like, he has to do this all day, every day, in order to make it worth doing in the first place. And as well, he's working 3 other jobs, like, at the same time. Jesus. So it's so brutal. And like, I know that there are hundreds of thousands of people who are doing the exact same thing, having to do all of these, just random small jobs, just to make ends meet. And I mean, yeah, that's In the Dark, baby. That's like Jane.
For sure. That's
Jane sleeping in a haunted house for, $800 or whatever it is, it's so interesting that all the way back in the year 2000, when a lot of these small sort of like, gig economy jobs didn't exist yet, or didn't exist in the form that they now exist in, it maps so clearly onto the structure that we now recognize.
I think also a very interesting thing to take note is the price of the gig economy. In this way, of course, like, this is the most direct sense of losing your autonomy, losing your time, losing control of your physical body in this sort of way where, like, you need to be doing actual stuff with your actual body. There is also like the loss of like future prospects, because like there's a very pointed scene where Jane is calling her mother while eating a tub of ice cream. Another great fucking mumblecore moment.
Yeah.
And also shout out to Margaret Manpa. That's a Finnish surname. So there's a Finland connection in the dark. Shout out. But in that moment, she's discussing like romantic like prospects going to the future, and like there's this implication. Well, not even implication. She just spells it out that Mom, I cannot be having like my life be tied to another person because I'm finally having this break in my career. I'm moving up tax brackets. Like, how
Yeah.
could I have kids in this economy? And
Mm-hmm.
like sort of like this like contrast of like the quote unquote good life of settling down and all that. And you can kind of read this in two ways, right? You can be like um, the sort of modern choice feminism aspect of, yeah, like you're supposed to have that freedom and it's valid,
Yeah.
which it is. But I think the intention of the movie and the sort of tragedy that they're trying to highlight is that when we move to this sort of grind set like thing, we do lose all of our close relationships because
Yes.
suddenly you don't have the structure and possibilities to build your life around your free time, your people around you. You're constantly on call. You're doing this bizarro fucking thing at 3 a.m. Where you go on a cemetery to stab a dog and you
Yeah.
get fabulously wealthy. And, you know, like, what the fuck is the point? But at the same
Yeah.
time, and I think that's also where Brace is a very pivotal character to understand in the dark, and that's why you can't sort of dismiss his presence. Is that, as I said, he has that unemployed friend on Tuesday at 2 a.m. vibe because he is constantly available and like trying to establish this relationship, and he's the voice of reason, and clearly he doesn't have a lot going on, and he's
Mm.
like, hey, maybe don't do this bad decision to go on this line of work.
Mm.
And he is presented as like this fulfilling romantic prospect that is being taken away on like very like this direct and also in this very indirect way because like she doesn't have the time for her, although it does seem that there's the interest towards
Yeah.
Brace.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's, I mean, we're seeing this in the real world as well. We're seeing that like marriage rates and things like that are decreasing amongst like people of sort of our generation. And I mean, speaking from personal experience, speaking of like friends and things like that, I know that I've got friends who have been in committed relationships for a decade plus, and they would love to get married and they simply cannot. Like it's such a financial investment that they simply can't do it, or they can't do it in the way that they would like to. My wife and I, we were very fortunate. We got married almost 3 years ago now, and it was a lot of money to do it. And we had a pretty conservative wedding. Like we didn't invite every person that we'd ever met. We invited the people that were important to us, and it still cost thousands and thousands of dollars. And like we're very lucky that we were able to do that, because even a year later, when some of our friends were talking about, oh, maybe we're like gonna be engaged soon and things like that, they they weren't able to, and they're still not able to, because there's like there is this financial sort of hindrance. I've got friends as well who are trying to like buy houses and things like that, and they can't. Even here in New Zealand, we have or maybe had at time of recording, we had a lot of like government like grants and things like that to help people buy their first homes. And even with all of that being put in, they're just not able to. They just cannot afford the deposit on a house or anything like that. So yeah, all of these choices that people want to make for themselves and want to make for their lives is being taken away by these systems that are at the same time saying, you need to be working. You should be working. You should be working harder, because if you were working harder, you would be making more money and you would be able to afford the things that you want. And it's simply not true.
Yeah, and that really rings true, because we're trying to get married in 2 years with my fiance, and now that I think about it, I've like there's that sound somewhere in the nape of my neck that whispers to me in the dark of the night, like, oh man, I wish there was a master of games that would give me $1,000 for just going to do some stupid shit somewhere, because like the precarity of just like normal life is getting like tougher and tougher. And we also had an election this year, like a parliament election, and we got the jackpot of the third worst parties coalescing into a terrible far-right nightmare that's just like trying to strip everything. Mm-hmm. And even their one thing that they were namely trying to do, which is to lower our debt, is that they're actually racking up way more debt than our like social democrat party led government during COVID. Like, they're breaking all the records. What they have to show for it is 7,000 more children who are going to be living under poverty line, no art grants, fucking more homeless people, people who are living on social security have to move from their houses because they're too expensive. Not even like in the sense that they're raising rent. No, they're lowering the threshold for social like help for rent. And you know, it's a complete nightmare. Yeah. And I think in that sort of way, the major difference, like why the sort of analog between gig economies and master of game, between In the Dark, isn't like completely one-to-one, is that for me personally, I probably would just skip the phase of being curious about like who's master of games and I'm inserting myself in the workplace. I would just be like, dude, just give me a task. I'll shoot someone. Just give me the $64,000. I need to get married. I need a bigger house if we ever have a kid. Like, dude, just, whatever. But at the same time, like, there is that sort of like loss of autonomy in that sort of like way, because like the incentives are constantly sort of pushing you towards overextending yourself and doing more and more and more for less, basically. I've been like steadily employed for almost 5 years now, and it just seems that I'm still living from hand to mouth.
Yes.
And it's just not like it just seems like things are not doing all that well globally and locally, and it is the sort of true horror of In the Dark is this like incentive structure, the fabulous wealth of $500 to spend a night somewhere kind of cruddy.
Yeah, I mean, a little like peek behind the curtain. One of the reasons that I started doing this show, I've been toying with the idea for a couple of years, but the thing that really pushed me to finally like actually sit down, record an episode, was I was working a job that I absolutely hated, and it was taking up all of my time. And I didn't feel as though I had anything that was my own. I didn't feel like I had all of these interests. I had, this love for movies, and I pursued that throughout university. And then I came out of university, and there were no jobs. There were no jobs for me in the field that I wanted to be in. And so I started working retail again, which I had worked. I've been working since I was 13. Like I've been unemployed, I think just once. I've been kind of lucky in that way. But I've been working basically non-stop for the past 14 years. And it takes it out of you. And so, yeah, I came out of university, wasn't able to find a job doing the thing that I loved. And so I started working retail again, and I hated it. I just felt so bad. I would wake up every day and I would dread going into work. And I didn't feel like me anymore. And so, yeah, eventually I was like, I have to do something. I have to do something to break this cycle. And so I was like, all right, what can I do? Well, I can record a podcast. I can sit down and I can talk for, 20 minutes, half an hour about a film that I've watched that I found interesting. And that was so freeing, and it made me feel so good. And it still does. Every time I sit down to record, I'm like, this is cool that I get to do this. And, I'd be lying if I said that there wasn't some part of me that was like, I wish I was being paid for it. I'm lucky, partway through this year, I think in like March or April, I got into the job that I'm currently working, where I'm editing videos, I'm shooting videos, and taking photographs, I'm recording podcasts and things like that, for a local university. And it's the first time it's the first time I've had a job where I'm actually excited to go in. I'm excited to do the work and things like that. I'm very fortunate in that sense. But yeah, still, it's like I wish that when I started this show, one of the first things that I did was set up a Patreon. And that was because I wanted there to be some like financial incentive. And I've sort of moved away from that. I've stopped plugging the Patreon and things like that at the end of episodes. All of the episodes that I was recording for, the Patreon exclusive episodes and things like that, they're all now on the main feed. And it's because I've sort of come to realize that I'm lucky that I can do this just for the love of it, and there doesn't have to be a financial incentive, and that's been really nice. Like it's taken some of the pressure off of the show as well. But yeah, I'm lucky that is the case, because if I was still working a job that I hated that was paying me, less than sort of what I'm currently making, then yeah, I would still be pushing really hard for this to be financially viable.
Which is itself like notoriously sort of a bad idea. Because eventually you sort of get into these like, okay, what's popping with the algorithm?
Yeah.
What movies are trending? What's out right now? And I think both of us just would completely dissolve in that situation. Like there's just not a lot of us that would sort of survive the content mill. And talking about like stuff that is like inherently like transgressive in a way, and niche and specific, does have the like implied danger of just like is it even worth it if you're doing it for finances? Like, no, it is not. And you can see a lot of people eventually do get to a point where they're just covering whatever is coming out and classics and stuff. And it is definitely a dynamic that I'm like actively trying to disengage my thought in every time I get that, like, because I also have that, like, how would it feel to do this full time, or even get some sort of financial like incentive to continue and stuff. But eventually it just comes down to, well, if it happens, cool, probably won't. Let's just focus on doing it just because it's fun and there are people who resonate with the thing as it is. And I think it is just a healthy thing to have that space. And I remember after coming out of film school, I was really bummed out about the situation with the Finnish movie industry. It's been getting a lot better since. And in some ways, we are slowly approaching a small renaissance of Finnish movies. There have actually been good Finnish movies coming out over the past couple of years, which is like legitimately surprising. Most Finnish movies in the last like 40 years are ass. Like, not even like interesting ass, not like, you know, people doing low budget stuff. It's just been like Rob Schneider type comedies, but in Finnish. And you're like, no. So when I got out of film school and they were like, well, you can actually be quite wealthy while you're doing this because it is such a niche profession and it is physically taxing, and that like you can actually, the wages are pretty good, but the downside is, as it is in the dark, that the things you lose begin to be your personal autonomy. You're always looking forward, like just like in the way Jane is always expecting that envelope to finally come to her. Oh yes, finally a payday. I get to do this thing and I get money for it. In the same way, in the Finnish movie industry at the time, especially, but still ongoing, is that every job is a gig. Like, you're doing these very like sort of well-paid 1 or 2 day jobs, and then you're unemployed again. And it is such a straining sort of push and pull of, well, I'm unemployed, I need to look for unemployment, but before they even get the chance to check my papers, I'm back on the job, and I'm trying to hustle myself a new job within the industry. I know these people, and then you get into stuff like, one of the things that really sort of struck me first year of film school, my teacher who showed us, Tarkovsky and stuff, was like, the sad thing is you probably will never do anything like this, but the even more sad thing is the likelihood of you developing like a substance abuse problem is more common than not doing that. And you will probably burn through at least a couple of marriages, and your kids will hate you because you'll be away for 3 months to make a commercial for Lidl in Lapland or something, and you will probably have like these weird complicated relationship with people in the industry and stuff. And the moment I graduated, I was like, okay, I cannot do this for a job. It was really cool, really nice. I need to figure out what to do from here on out. Luckily, I got into librarianship via non-military service, which is a whole other sort of story. But so I did get to use my education in a very constructive way. But like, it just all comes back to this sort of malaise of not having any security, not having any agency, not being able to see yourself, like being fully alienated from your work.
Yes.
And in the case of In the Dark, it is just like she's so thoroughly alienated that all of the things she does are completely meaningless outside of the fact that you get paid.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
just such a terrifying like thought in a very existential adult way.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. It's that is what I think makes this a horror film. Outside of like just sort of the sort of like aesthetic signifiers, outside of just like the moments of, you know, the outbursts of violence and gore. The thing that makes this a horror movie is just that sense that you're left with at the end of this person has just been completely stripped for parts. Like they are just doing these rote tasks for seemingly no reason.
And the thing that like separates it from where we are at now is that even in Jane's case, she's like, once again, legitimately fabulously wealthy by the end of it.
Yes.
Like, it is implied that she lives in a hotel room with like a clerk that knows her. She has this like fur like coat, and like she lives, well, you know, they probably didn't have like the budget to really make it seem like she's living in this paradise, but there is a nice sort of ocean view and like all of that. Like she gets paid, and yet in the final moments of the movie she's a devastated person. Like she's completely like hollowed out, just a drone doing stuff. Everything has been lost, her romantic prospects, and you know, she's just doing a job. She's being paid for it really well, yet things are just bad, really bad. Contrasted to now, we're doing that and we're getting pennies. Like, how much worse could it get?
Yeah. It's it's tragic. It's man, what a film though. Like really just so good. And I find myself returning to it a lot since I first watched it. When I first watched it, I hadn't seen really any shot on video films, and so I didn't really know what to make of it, but it just stuck in the back of my mind, and I ended up rewatching it like over the course of, I want to say like 3 or 4 weeks. I watched it 3 or 4 times because I just kept thinking about it, and I mean that's a good film for me.
That's a mark for sure. Like if you keep watching it, most likely pretty good, because it is almost 2 hours long too. Like it is not like a 70-minute banger. It's like legitimately like a lengthy movie in that sort of way. Like it's not like West of the Tracks or anything, but you know, it is an investment in time.
Yeah, it is.
I do have a couple of notes, just like scattered thoughts I really wanted to go through before closing. And one of them is the thing about being shot on video. I have like zero clue what the camera is that they used, but a really fun little detail is that every time the camera is like even a small bit away from Jane, her eyes look like they're like reptilian. Like they have the, like, I don't know what happens there, but they just have this inhuman quality that is like it's sort of goes into the uncanny valley sort of situation without really underlying that it's happening, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's just this nice little stylistic thing that exists in the movie.
Yeah, and that's just out of the camera. Like, they haven't done anything to manipulate the footage. You see people, looking back at like old news broadcasts and things like that with like the reptilian elite sort of conspiracy theories, where it's like, look at how weird Obama's eyes are in this clip, and it's like, yeah, dude, that's like camera artifacting. That's like poor video compression and things like that. Like, that's just have you seen the H Bomber Guy video talking about flat Earth? There's a really great moment in that where one of the pieces of evidence that one of these flat earthers is using is taking a photo from NASA, putting it into Photoshop and cranking the gamma all the way up, and it shows like this square that forms around the Earth. And he's like, "Why has that happened?" And it's like, that's JPEG compression. That's just what happens with the tools that we use. It's another example of these like emergent like aesthetics. This film it's simultaneously very like meticulously crafted, and also is sort of created free form as well, just by virtue of the material sort of like nature of the film, the way that it was created, the tools that were used, the lights that they used, the camera that they had access to, all of these things. Yeah, it lends the film this really brilliant aesthetic quality.
Yeah, and I really think that that's also like we already touched on the one scene with color, because I don't think we mentioned, but in The Dark is a black and white movie, except for one scene that's like diegetically like found footage, and it is like so distressing, and because it is in color, whenever they zoom into the picture with like digital zoom in an editing program, you can really see like the artifacts grow in size in this way that's really reminiscent of like, this is a deep early like gore videos on internet. Like, I think that's the vibe they really give off, is this like, it's just camera placed somewhere, and this person who is vulnerable being attacked in this very sort of crude yet elaborate way. And suddenly, like, the distressing part about like having colors all of a sudden, and they're the ugliest colors you've ever seen. Very flat and sort of like grainy and like move in a weird way.
It's like got this like sickly sort of like green yellow like cast to it. The paint on the walls is just like, this like horrible color, and it's like, does it look this bad in real life, or is this just what the camera has like done to it?
Yeah, and I feel it really has, because of that connection. Once again, this was pre-shock site stuff, so it's not referencing anything, but it does have that quality of like sort of peeping into a situation that is very, very just like disquieting. Like, you're just like, I should not be watching this. This feels wrong.
Yeah.
And then it's implied later that the whole thing was scrubbed from existence by whoever's doing Master of Games bidding in that scene.
Yeah.
So it's just for our eyes only. We're getting this information that Jane is never getting, and you're like, damn. But at the same time, damn, because that shit was very, very terrifying. I'm glad that she doesn't have to go through it like we did as an audience.
Yeah, it's that I think was the moment when I watched this with friends. That was the moment that they were like, oh, this is doing something. Like, up until that point, they had been enjoying the film, but that moment hits, and it feels so startling. Like the first time that I watched it, I didn't think it was a mistake because it's too deliberate for it to be that, but it feels, like you said, it feels like we shouldn't be seeing it. It feels wrong that it is like in this movie presented in the way that it is. And watching this film with an audience, when that moment hit, it was just like, oh wow, like their jaws were like on the floor.
Yeah, it is a real highlight in so many different ways. Also, one of the scenes that really got me in that sort of oh shit way was in the scene where Jane goes to the house with the three murderers and the mutilated women. Honestly, that scene, for the most part, I thought it was surprisingly weak compared to a lot of the other stuff. There's that moment when, she shoots them that's really intriguing from the beginning onward, because she opens up a door where to the room where the murderers are, and there's this weird sort of, how would I even describe it, like this digital feeling filter on top of this like circus, like carnival performance dude.
Yes.
And it's also just like, what the fuck is going on again, because you have these like stylistic elements in that happen like only twice in the color scene and here, and you're just immediately just in the tune of like, oh fuck, something terrible is happening. And then she kills those people, like the people who have been doing these horrible like mutilations and stuff. And the final person just like does the devil horns and dies with a smile in his face. And it is just like such a weird detail to have, but I just couldn't stop thinking about it afterwards, because it is like funny. But it feels like, in the same way that Terrortoons feels like it's funny on my expense, it feels like it's funny on my expense. Like you're not supposed to be seeing this weird little off take. And then they cut back to the screen. They were watching TV. I didn't mention that, but they're watching TV, and that's the weird sort of formalist filter effect thing with the carnival person.
Yeah.
And the carnival person like takes a bow and leaves, and she's like, okay, it's my time to go as well. And then the most horrifying little beat is that she's like leaving through a window, and one of the girls, who's the most like mutilated, she has her other hand cut, she has like half of her right foot cut off, just jumps behind her with a knife and tries to kill her. And she's like, hey, I'm like trying to save you and all, like you should come with us. And she's like, no, come back here so I can kill you. And it's like this weird tonal dissonance of this person is holding on to her captivity, question mark, like what's going on here? But her performance is just so like wavering on that. This is like bad, but also it is like this off-putting weird tone where you're not sure what she's doing here exactly.
Yeah.
And the way she moves is very uncanny. Once again, I was like, I have this thing where like weird uncanny movement fucks me up. The same thing happened with Horror in the High Desert, which I talked about in my found footage video. Towards the end, there's a person who just walks kind of weird, and I was just like completely just creeped out the whole way. Which, looking back, is it ableist? Maybe, but the jury's out. Cancelable offense, maybe, we'll see. But I don't know, that little moment also kind of distressing in a very specific way that isn't often hit on with these sort of like shot on video horror movies, in my experience.
Yeah, the more of these types of movies I watch, the sort of more interesting I think In the Dark becomes, because like for every good shot on video film, for every Red Spirit Lake or After Last Season or something like that, you have a lot of like what's the one that I'm thinking of? Blood Shack. Have you ever seen this? It's also called The Trooper. It's a really unremarkable film. Like a large chunk of it features the characters just walking around like a rodeo, because there was a rodeo that happened to be in town when they were making the movie, and they needed some footage, and so they just went and walked around a rodeo, just filmed like all of the people there, and like there are people in the shot on video sort of space who are being really experimental and really pushing the aesthetic as far as it will go, and then there are a lot of people who just see it as a way to make a cheap buck. And In the Dark is luckily one of the former. They are the filmmakers are really, really using the video aesthetic to create something really distinct, really uncanny, really striking. Because there's a lot of moments in this movie that are quite hard to make out. There's a lot of like there are points where this movie looks like relatively generic, and then there are these moments where it looks like nothing you've ever seen before.
I agree.
And they are,
I agree.
They're using spotlighting in a really interesting way. They are using color in a really interesting way, as we just talked about. It's very striking.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I just keep coming back to when I think about In the Dark in relation to other shot on video movies is that a lot of other like shot on video movies, let's say like one of my all-time favorites, and I know it's yours too because you just updated your top 4 on Letterboxd, is House with Arched Windows, which is a fantastic movie, but it almost feels like it's accidental.
Yes.
Like it is very like emergent from the elements present. Like it's just like somebody hitting like a guitar with their just fingers on it, and it just rings out the most haunting chord you've ever heard.
Yeah.
And then you're like, can you do that again? And they're like, nope. Whereas this feels like it's constantly like planned and sort of done with this finesse, especially when it comes to like editing. Like I think like the editing here is stellar. There's a moment towards the end where Jane is trying to kill time in Brace's place, where she's playing video games, and she's like, well, we have to stay awake throughout the night because I'm in this precarious situation where if I fall asleep, I'll be vulnerable to Master of Games, which sounds like a supernatural thing, but isn't. And they're playing video games, and Jane walks to, turns to watch Brace, and he's like sleeping, and I think there's like a little piece of cloth in his face, and then there's a match cut to Jane being like bound and gagged, and then there's another cut of her like aftermath. There's like blood on her stomach. She's being written on with a knife, and like it is like this very like simple but super effectively made scene that just really like jolted me up, right? I was just like, oh my fucking god, like, whoa, this is like horrible. And I've seen similar things being attempted in other like shot on video movies and like generally like low budget movies, but it just doesn't feel the same as it does here, which is so weird because like the director felt like he failed when making this, and it's so insane. You're just like, dude, you're firing on all cylinders here. Like, you're doing like a top 50 horror movies of all time here, and you're like, oh man, I fucking failed. This is the worst. I should just bury myself in my backyard. I'm such a failure. And you're like most people, if you're just like, well, it is a bit of a hard sell for maybe like an average audience, but like most people who are working in this sort of environment would cut off a leg and eat their other arm just to make something approaching this good.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's perfect throughout. Like, there are moments where it does, like, it fails to upkeep that like level of excellence. Like, for me, the scene where Jane goes to the house with the three murders is the like worst bit, and then there's a little like maybe 10 seconds where Jane comes out of the haunted house after trying to return to it, which kind of show how the movie could be bad. But then you're like, and then it just like kind of tightens the screw, and you're suddenly in like masterpiece territory again.
Yeah, you're back.
So you do get to see like these moments where they're not like fully on the mark, and then they suddenly return. Like the pitch wavers, but only for just like maybe 2 minutes at a time.
Yeah. The cumulative effect of this film is very strong. It is a film that you kind of have to meet part way, but if you can, then it's going to be really rewarding for you. It's gonna provide a real mood and a real atmosphere that's hardly seen anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think that's also a very important note to sort of hit on, is like meeting stuff halfway, because I think this is a more general thing I've noticed is like when I was in film school, and even a couple of years after, I thought that like, of course, you have personal taste that determines like how you approach art somewhat, but I used to believe in this sort of like, when you're in the presence of a masterpiece, it will just sort of reveal itself to you. There's that moment where even something you don't like, suddenly like the clouds part and you see, oh, it was perfect all along. But it's
just it sings,
and you're like, oh, it could be just like a sine wave suddenly becomes a full orchestra in your mind. But that's not actually how stuff like this works. Like, when you move away from that invisible style, you move away from the respectable movies, respectable music, and you move on to the circles of experimental, low budget, outsider, whatever you want to call it, sort of stuff. You have to sort of adjust yourself with it. You have to think it through, sort of be willing to go to emotional or intellectual places you probably wouldn't be able to access with something like a Marvel movie or something. And I think you can also, like, after you've done it, it sort of shifts your perspective towards those movies as well, and you start to find all of these connections and all that. But I think what's the most important thing when approaching stuff like In the Dark is to remind yourself that watching movies and engaging with art is a relationship you're having with not even just like the artist. You're having a conversation with yourself, the world around you, the piece itself, the artist, your like perception of the artist, your perception of what artist even is, etc., etc. Like, it's this very nebulous, huge hole you have to contend with. But when you find a way to approach it, the clouds will eventually part because you walked past them.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a quote that I love. It's from just like a little 2 or 3 panel comic strip talking about abstract art, which is, "You, my friend, are a space too."
Yes, I know this one. It is fantastic.
You have to art. Art will have as much abstract art or art that otherwise sort of breaks with convention will have as much meaning as you allow it to. And I think that's a really sort of good way to approach art, is with an open heart and an open mind, and allow yourself to be engaged. Don't just be passive in your viewing. Allow yourself to fall completely into a work. Thank you so much, Ipu, for joining me on this show. It's been really, really great talking to you. It's been really great having you on. Your channel continues to be an inspiration to me and to my work. And it's been really rewarding having you here.
Yeah, it's been a great pleasure. As I expected, I could have gone for another hour at least. Like right back at you. I've found your channel to be extremely just the feeling of there are other people who are doing similar stuff is so satisfying by itself. But then you actually get like, damn, like this person actually has a great sense of perspective and a lot of interesting things to say. And then I found about the podcast, and then you're like, yes, and they have a good taste as well. Although in the episode previous to this, or I don't know if there's going to be like a buffer episode or something, you talk about Tomie
Replay?
Yeah. Tomie Forbidden Fruit, 5 out of 5 banger. Highly recommend anyone who's listening go check that out. It is, I haven't seen Replay, but probably better because that movie is one of the best Japanese horror movies of all time, in at least like top 15, because Japan makes a lot of good movies.
I've been really looking forward to getting to that film, because the first 2 Tomie films are a little they're a little bland, but yeah, everybody always says, "Oh, Forbidden Fruit, that's the one," and I'm like, cannot wait.
It is fantastic. I love that movie so much. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This has been pleasurable beyond my imagination.
Is there anything that you want to plug?
Not really. I have so many projects in the works. Last time, actually, I'm just gonna pitch just a couple, because last time I was in a podcast, a lot of people came in because they heard me pitch a couple of vids I still haven't done. Funnily enough, they misheard what I was saying. So if I plant it here at the end, maybe it will be, I don't know how it would be, but maybe it's clearer. I'm currently working on the end of the year video. It's going to be in 2 parts, because it's going to be like 35 movies long or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's going to be, first part is just like generally good short movies, good movies I saw. And the second one will be like these thematic categories that are more just like about a vibe or something.
Oh, yeah.
And to hype up the final part, the final chapter will be the Bonkers Continuum. And there are some truly weird movies I'll be discussing there. And I'm trying to move next year to do a couple more like series. Well, I'm trying to do a couple of series. One's going to be about rural art movies from countries people haven't seen movies from. And then there's going to be a 3-part series about quote-unquote bad CGI movies, which I love. I'm going to be the person who's going to walk in here and be like, you all are wrong about CGI in movies. Photorealism sucks ass, and the worse it looks, the better it is.
Hell yeah.
One I will do like pretty much immediately after the end year vid comes out is gonna be about Debbie Does Damnation, and sort of the historicity of the Debbie Does Dallas series in quotation marks.
Nice.
Yeah, that should be fun. It could be that I just get inspired to do something else. I'm currently writing about Flickr movies. But yeah.
Oh yeah.
A lot of stuff in the pipeline that'll be both in sort of the continuum of this podcast episode, but also just weird art movies.
Nice.
So that's quite a lot of plugging after saying, not really. But ain't that how it is? It's good to have accountability to at least someone in the audience to be like, hey, you were supposed to make that a video about Debbie Does Damnation. You're like, yeah, true. I already got it written down, but I never.
I'll be following up. I'll be checking in.
My DMs will be full. Hey, when's that Debbie Damnation thing coming out? I'm like, oh fuck.
I have a video dropping. It should be the week that this comes out. I'm gonna try and line it up. I've already shot it, so it's just editing now. Talking about the web series Angel Hair, which is a very emotional video for me. It was unscripted. I watched the series and I just felt really compelled to talk about it and talk about the way that children's entertainment sort of functions, what the purpose of children's entertainment is. So that video will be releasing alongside this, maybe a couple of days after, just to give it a little bit of breathing room. But yeah, otherwise, thank you to Janka Glonis for the use of their track Slime Dripping Down the Walls off of the album Fun Time Party Gal. Link to that album and their Bandcamp can be found in the episode description. Thank you to Live at the Death Factory as well, to Sean McTiernan and Astrid Rose for having introduced me to this film. I know that they had a lot of people start sort of talking about films that they had covered on their show and not plugging them, and I don't want to be another one of those. So I'll put a link to that show's website in the episode description as well, along with a couple other bits and pieces that listeners might find interesting. Next time on the show, we're going to be covering Ju-on the Curse Part 2. Long-time listeners will remember that Ju-on the Curse was the most harrowing experience I've had recording an episode of this show. I had a really hard time watching that film. Ju-on is perhaps still the most terrifying film that I have ever seen. I watched it far too young, and those nightmares will not go away. But until then, this has been the Most Maligned Horror Podcast.